Welcome back, my dear listener. The candles are lit, the fire crackles low, and the world outside is far away now, just as it should be. You've returned to that quiet corner of history where time slows down, the past breathes, and truth wears a dark, heavy cloak. Tonight we're not just peeking into the past, we're surviving it. So close your eyes, rest your mind, and let me take you somewhere cold, smoky, and a little too quiet. To a time when being a woman was dangerous and being slightly too interesting could get you killed. This is the Complete Guide to Surviving as a Witch in 17th Century Europe, and trust me, you're going to need it. You were born at the wrong time. That's your first mistake. Not that you had much say in the matter, but if you'd like to survive 17th century Europe as a woman, especially one not too ugly, not too quiet, not too loud, and God help you if you're clever, you'll need to understand that mistake and work around it. Your second mistake? Being born at all. In a world where people still think toothaches are caused by demons gnawing on your soul and baths are suspiciously French, being female is a risky business. Not just because childbirth is a fun little dice roll with death, but because you're living in an age where superstition is more popular than bread, and the church has made it clear anything remotely mysterious, female, or herbal-smelling might just be witchcraft. Congratulations, you're on thin ice, and you haven't even learned to walk yet. Let's start with the basics. You're a baby, a girl baby, specifically. Your mother isn't celebrating with streamers and cake. She's probably biting down on a rag, bleeding onto straw, hoping you live long enough to cry, but not so long that you end up a burden. If you're born during a thunderstorm, under a full moon, or with any birthmark that vaguely resembles a goat, you're off to a suspicious start. In some villages, midwives quietly resolve that problem. Let's just say not every baby survives baptism. You grow up learning to keep your head down. You're told to be good, but not too good. You are encouraged to be helpful, but not healing. Healing smells like witchcraft. You want to learn your letters? Careful. Women who can read are dangerous. The devil likes women who read. It means you can understand things you shouldn't, like scripture, or herbal recipes, or your own opinions. Here's your first bit of actual survival advice. Tip chapter 1. If you want to live, try to be pleasantly forgettable. Don't be too pretty. That invites attention, and attention invites rumors, and rumors invite fire. Don't be too ugly either. That offends the eye, and a bitter neighbor might call your face a curse. Don't be too old, crone. Don't be too young, temptress. And never ever be unmarried after 30. That's prime witch territory. Why aren't you married? What have you been doing alone all this time? Plotting, dancing naked in the woods? You laugh, but this is serious. You might be wondering, what exactly gets a woman accused of witchcraft in 17th century Europe? The answer is everything: boiled water, suspiciously hot, cried during church, emotional instability, laughed during church, blasphemous delight, didn't attend church, definitely a witch, attended too often, obsessive, probably trying to seduce the priest, owns a cat, witch, owns no cat, where's your familiar hiding? You see the issue. Tip number 2. Avoid being helpful. People don't trust women who know things. Midwifery, herbal knowledge, stitching wounds, calming fevers. These are useful skills, yes, but they also make people nervous. If someone recovers after you gave them tea, it wasn't the tea. It was your unclean spirit. If someone doesn't recover, you poison them with that same spirit. Either way, you're in trouble. You're better off pretending you don't know the difference between parsley and poison. Better to be a bit useless. It's safer. Tip number 3. Watch your mouth. Silence is golden, and sarcasm is heresy. God help you if you're funny, really. A sharp tongue on a woman is considered either a mark of demonic possession or some unfortunate womb-based hysteria. Men are allowed to make jokes. Women are expected to make soup. Speak only when spoken to. Even then, pause. Look down. Don't offer opinions and never correct anyone, even if they're wrong about something basic, like how fire works or whether the moon causes sin. The moon, for the record, is always suspicious, especially full moons. Don't look at it too long, someone might notice. Tip V4. Don't stand out from anything ever. You wear simple clothes, rough wool, dull colors, nothing too black, suspicious, nothing too red, temptress, nothing too clean. How are you staying so clean? Never wear jewelry that wasn't handed down through 3 generations of God-fearing mud farmers. That silver cross you made. From melted coins? No, that's alchemy. And alchemy is just science with bad PR. You don't dance. You don't sing alone. You don't hum. You certainly don't carve little figures from sticks and arrange them by your window, even if they make you feel safe. That's pagan, or worse, creative. Tip number 5, learn to apologize for things that aren't your fault. Did the crops fail? Say sorry. Did the neighbor's baby get a rash? Say sorry. Did the baker's wife dream about blood and chickens? Say sorry. Did your father trip on a rock and sprain his ankle? Witchcraft? Yours? Say sorry. Apologies won't save you, but they might buy you a day or two. Now let's talk about the trials. No, not metaphorical ones, actual trials. The ones with torture and water and iron and righteous shouting. You may be wondering, how do these trials work? They don't. There is no system, no actual logic. There are tests, sure. One classic favorite is the swimming test, where you're tied up and thrown into a river. If you sink and drown, congratulations, you were innocent. If you float, you're guilty and will be burned. The devil, you see, doesn't allow his brides to drown. He has a flair for irony. Another test, the witch's mark. They'll strip you down, poke every inch of your body with a sharp needle, and if they find a spot that doesn't bleed or feel pain, a freckle, a mole, an ingrown hair, there it is, proof. The devil kissed you there, not romantically, just legally. The devil's teat is another one. Any unusual bump or skin tag might be accused of being a second nipple used to feed your demonic familiar. A toad, a black dog, a rat, your neighbor's missing chicken. Anything, really. You don't get a say. And of course, there's the good old-fashioned confession. You might say, I'm not a witch. They'll say, then why haven't you confessed yet? You say, because I'm not guilty. They'll say, we'll help you remember. Cue sleep deprivation, starvation, thumbscrews, and sometimes, just to add drama, actual branding irons. Eventually you will confess. Everyone does, because pain has a way of convincing you that maybe you did dance in a clearing once, maybe you did talk to a fox that looked too smart, maybe the devil really did visit you in your dreams. That's the plan. They break you, and when you're broken enough, they thank you for your honesty and light a match. So, you want to survive? Don't be beautiful. Don't be old. Don't be too fertile or too barren. Don't heal. Don't teach. Don't read. Don't be unmarried or too happily married. Don't talk to animals. Don't wear shoes that are too nice. Don't whisper. Don't walk alone. Don't hum. Don't help. Don't know things. Don't. Be angry. Don't be alone. Don't be different. Don't be noticed, which you may be realizing is nearly impossible. You don't have to be a witch to be burned as one. You just have to be inconvenient. Still want to keep going? Good. You're stubborn. That's dangerous. But then again, so is everything. Let's say you've made it to womanhood. That's already impressive. The odds weren't great. Disease, childbirth, famine, and the general fragility of life have already claimed half your childhood friends. But here you are, against all odds. Fully, grown, suspiciously alive, and one accidental footstep away from the pyre. You've mastered the basics. Don't be pretty, don't be ugly, don't be loud, don't be noticeable. But now we come to the real threat. Religion. You thought it was just about God. Oh no, it's about everyone else's opinion of how well you perform your God-fearing duties. First, understand this. Your soul is constantly at risk. Everything is sin. Thinking is sin. Not thinking is sin. Laughing, sin. Crying too often, sin. Questioning, Why half your village died from bad grain, while the priest's wine cellar is untouched? Sin existing? Sin adjacent at best? Every sermon is a warning, every Sunday is a test. Sit still, bow your head, look guilty, but not too guilty. Sing the Psalms, but not with joy. Joy implies personal freedom, and personal freedom smells like heresy. You must sing like someone terrified of God's judgment, which conveniently you should be. There are saints to venerate, relics to respect, and at least 5 different feast days you must not accidentally fast on. Or was it fast on? A feast day? Honestly, no one's sure. But if you get it wrong, someone will notice. That someone will probably be Margaretha from 3 huts down. Margaretha notices everything, especially about you, which brings us to the next survival rule. Tip number 6. Know your enemies. They probably live next door. Neighbors are dangerous. They see too much. They know when your bread doesn't rise. They know when your goat gives sour milk. They know when your husband limps in after an argument. They see your laundry, your habits, your comings and goings. And they talk. Oh, they talk. Did you know Margaretha's cousin's servant swore she saw you picking yarrow at twilight? For tea, you said. But tea for what? Menstrual cramps? How convenient. Also a known witch's plant, used to ease childbirth, reduce bleeding, and curse livestock. Which one were you using it for? Gossip is faster than plague, and more fatal. Tip. For 7, keep your suffering public. Privacy breeds suspicion. If your child dies, and statistically at least 2 will, make sure you wail loudly. Wear black. Smear ash on your face. Curse the devil. Blame yourself loudly and often. Do not retreat quietly into grief. That looks wrong. That looks like someone who knew this would happen. If you're ill, suffer in the open. Don't treat yourself in secret with herbs or poultices, even if they work, especially if they work. A mysterious recovery is worse than death. If your husband beats you, and let's be honest, he does, do not hide the bruises. People expect women to be beaten. It's practically in the marriage contract. If you don't look injured from time to time, people will assume you're casting charms to control him. And if your husband dies, oh no. Tip number 8. Never be a widow without looking very sorry. You are now officially in the most dangerous social category, woman without a man. Even if he died of gout or plague or choking on his own ego, the town will whisper, "She didn't look too sad. She always brewed him that funny tea. She still has all her teeth at her age." The safest thing to do? Immediately remarry, preferably to someone large, loud, and illiterate. Someone who can both protect you and silence you. If you don't remarry, you must take up permanent mourning, black clothing, weeping at random intervals, maybe a little chapel visiting, and hand-wringing. Too much joy too soon is a red flag. Joy is dangerous. Joy means freedom. And freedom means, you know what? You're starting to notice the pattern, aren't you? Tip number 9. Never let your livestock die in public view. Animals are unpredictable. That's not your fault. But if your cow gives birth to a calf with a weird leg, or your hens stop laying, or your dog howls at the moon, guess who's getting the ace? Blame? You animals, you see, are spiritually sensitive. The devil is known to work through them. And if he's in your barn, then he's probably in you. There are actual trial records where the animals were also executed. No joke. A pig once stood trial in France for witchcraft and was hanged. Your goat, poor thing, wouldn't even get a lawyer. So if your animals act strangely, you'd better start praying. Loudly. In Latin, if you can fake it. Now, let's talk about how an accusation actually starts. It rarely begins with a dramatic incident. It starts small. A look, a comment, a badly timed illness in someone else's home. Then someone says, "I just don't trust her." Another adds, "She's always been a bit strange." Suddenly, people are remembering things you never did. Muttered something under her breath. And then the fire went out. She touched my baby, and now he won't stop crying. She looked at my husband, and now he's coughing blood. She keeps her garden too neat. No one has that many onions. You're a witch now. Congratulations. Tip Chapter 10. If they come knocking, don't run. That's worse. If the local bailiff or priest or magistrate arrives with a document and a scowl, don't panic. Not outwardly. Running makes you look guilty. And besides, where would you go? The woods? The next village? Every place has its own Margaretha. Word travels. Instead, act confused. Then act grateful. Thank them for their concern. Insist you're loyal to God, to the church, to the law. Smile, but not too much. Cry, but not theatrically. And prepare. Because the next part is ugly. First they question you. Harmlessly, at first. Have you ever had visions, dreams? Heard strange voices? Do you know any prayers not from church? Did your grandmother ever teach you anything odd? You say no. But they already know you're lying. Then they search your home carefully. They'll confiscate your dried herbs, your grandmother's old comb, your carved spoon, your birthing stools. Anything that doesn't look purely practical is suspect. Then comes the examination. You will be stripped. They'll search for marks, those freckles, moles, scars, even pimples that prove you suckle the devil in your spare time. And then, if they still aren't satisfied, comes the real part, the confession. We already talked about the thumbscrews and branding irons, the sleep deprivation, the starvation. But here's the twist. The people doing this, they think they're helping you. They truly believe you've been seduced by Satan, that by forcing you to confess, they're saving your soul. You, meanwhile, just want to die quickly. You'll say anything, that you flew, that you danced in the forest, that a black dog spoke Latin to you and gave you the ability to cause hailstorms. You'll name other women. You'll beg for the flames, just to make it stop. And when you finally confess, congratulations again, you've not only doomed yourself, but anyone you named. And guess what? They're going to be questioned too. Now the circle spreads. One accusation becomes 5. 5 become 20. Soon the entire village is purifying itself by burning the most vulnerable, all because Margaretha didn't like your yarrow tea. So here you are, still alive, for now. But you're tired, aren't you? Tired of pretending you don't know things. Tired of avoiding eye contact. Tired of fearing a sneeze or a cough or a goat's bad mood might end your life. You've survived longer than most. You've done everything right, by their standards anyway, but that's not a guarantee. Nothing is. There's something bitterly ironic about this life you're living. You've bent yourself into 100 shapes to fit the mold, and still, it never seems enough. You've hidden your thoughts, swallowed your instincts, stitched your mouth, shut with obedience. And yet every time the church bell rings a little too long or a child sneezes the wrong way, someone's gaze lingers on you just a second too long. So you start doing the only thing left. You perform your godliness louder. Your house is now a stage. The door stays open longer so people passing by can hear your psalms. You leave the Bible out, always open, never dusty. You mumble blessings at your bread. You cross yourself at every chimney. You mutter Latin phrases in earshot of your neighbors, even if your Latin is mostly made up. Piety isn't about belief anymore. It's camouflage. You go to church even when you're sick, especially when you're sick, dragging yourself in with shaking legs and pale cheeks. That's not weakness. That's devotion. That's theater. That's survival. You tithe more than you can afford. You nod with tears in your eyes at every mention of Satan. You speak often of hell and never of hope. You become a portrait of spiritual fear, the kind people recognize and trust, and yet deep down, you know it's not enough, because no one wants a woman who merely survives a witchcraft suspicion. They want a woman who can point the finger elsewhere, so now you're faced with a decision. Stay silent and risk suspicion, or redirect it. It's easier than it should be. All it takes is a small whisper, an offhand comment. She talks to herself at night. I saw her drawing something in the dirt. Her dog hasn't barked in days. Isn't that strange? You hate yourself for it, but you also don't want to burn. And in this world, Morality is a luxury of the dead. Sometimes it doesn't even come from you. Sometimes it's just your expression when someone else makes a comment. The priest notices how you raise your eyebrow. The bailiff notes your hesitation, and suddenly you're off the hook, and someone else is in the firelight. It's disgusting, but it's safe. Still, even if you play the game, you can't always win, because this world is cracking open under the weight of its own fear. There are bad harvests now, back to back. Whole fields rotting, bread turning black with mold. Babies die in the womb. The livestock collapse in the snow. The air smells like mildew and ash and old meat. And no one wants to admit the real reasons. So instead, they start seeing witches everywhere. Your neighbor loses her only child. It's not disease, it's the devil. Your cousin's crops fail, must be someone's curse. The town elder falls from a ladder, clearly bewitched. Who even uses ladders that tall unless they're summoning something? Witch hunts don't start with witches. They start with hunger, with fear, with long winters and short tempers. They start when the human mind, desperate for meaning, decides that suffering must have a culprit. And in a world where everyone believes the devil is real, you don't need evidence. You need a name. Sometimes the trials spread slowly, like smoke. Sometimes they catch like wildfire. One day you're delivering bread to the miller's wife, and the next you hear that 3 women were dragged from their homes in the night. Someone swore they saw them in the forest with red candles and no shoes. Another said they made her miscarry by looking at her funny. They'll be questioned, confessed, burned. You avoid the village square that week. But the real horror comes when the ones being accused are people you know. Your midwife, your aunt, that girl who helped you after you fell from the cart that winter. You think, surely they'll see it's nonsense. Surely they'll stop, but they don't, because the accusation is the sentence. You learn to mourn silently. Public grief is suspicious. Why are you crying for a known witch? Did you know her? Did you ever speak with her alone? Did she touch you? Did you see her cat? Guilt spreads like frost. Even kindness becomes a crime, and so you start to wonder, is it time to go? You've heard of women fleeing into the forests, into distant towns where no one knows their names, but traveling is dangerous. There are wolves, bandits, soldiers, and you need papers, money, a man. A woman traveling alone is basically asking to be accused before she crosses the next county line. But staying, that's a slow gamble. So you weigh your options. Stay and live a lie. Leave and live in fear, or something else. Something more drastic. There are stories, real ones, of women who decided to embrace the role forced on them. If they were going to be accused of sorcery, they'd at least do something useful with it. They fled into the woods and became witches, healers, hermits, midwives who no longer bowed to the church, women who knew the old names for things, who carved symbols into trees and brewed teas that actually worked, who remembered the world before men decided what was sacred. But that path is lonely, and eventually the hunters always come. Because no matter how far you run, the idea of a woman who doesn't fear them is the most terrifying witch of all. So here you are again, caught in the teeth of a system built to chew you up. You try not to heed, to speak too much or too little. You attend the births but don't offer advice. You keep your hands clean, your voice soft, your head bowed. You say your prayers and you wait. Because in 17th century Europe, surviving isn't about strength. It's about invisibility. And you're very, very tired of trying not to exist. The thing no one tells you is that the people screaming about witches the loudest are often the ones paying you to deliver their babies. Yes, we're talking about midwives. Women like you, skilled, experienced, unlicensed, terrifying. You know what a breech birth looks like. You know what herbs stop bleeding, ease pain, help a mother's body recover. You've probably stuck your hands in places polite society pretends don't exist. You've seen death, breathed it in, pulled life out of it with your bare hands, and that makes you dangerous, not because you are a witch, but because you understand something most men of this world do not, how a woman's body works, and that, in this century, is a kind of black magic. Let's be clear, being a midwife doesn't automatically make you a suspect. At least, not at a first. You're tolerated, respected even, until something goes wrong, until a baby dies, or a mother bleeds out, or someone prays too hard and doesn't get what they want. Then suddenly, you're not a healer. You're a killer in a bonnet. You remember your training, such as it was, probably passed from an older woman, in whispers, in kitchens, in gardens, with the scent of mint and rue. You were taught the names of roots, how to watch for fever, what it means when the blood smells like iron for too long. You've seen enough births to know that nature is often cruel, but the village expects miracles, and when those miracles don't happen, someone must be to blame. Guess who? You've learned to keep your remedies godly. You call your herbs blessings. You sprinkle prayers over every bottle. You let the priest walk in halfway through labor and wave incense in your patient's face, even if it makes her choke. You agree with fervor that it is God who decides whether the baby survives, not you, never you, but still, the suspicion lingers, especially if you're unmarried or childless, or too educated or not educated enough. If your handwriting is too good, if your handwriting is non-existent, if you laugh too loud, if you don't laugh enough, if you know how to read Latin, if you don't understand your own Bible, contradictions are the bricks of your prison, and then comes Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Published back in the late 15th century, but still quoted like it's hot off the press, this manual is a bestseller in evil. Written by Heinrich Kramer, a man so obsessed with women's bodies, it borders on disturbing. The book is part theology, part fantasy, and part medieval incel rant. According to it, women are more prone to witchcraft because they're feebler in mind and body, easily swayed, and of course driven by insatiable sexual desire. It explains in graphic detail how witches seduce men, ride broomsticks, attend sabbats, and cause everything from impotence to sour milk. And yes, people take it seriously, courts use it, judges quote it, priests memorize it, even if it's a flaming pile of pseudo-scientific paranoia. It gives something the church has been craving, a blueprint for persecution. With this book in circulation, trials ramp up, and not just in tiny towns, cities too. Protestant, Catholic doesn't matter. Fear is ecumenical. Now the trials begin. Real ones. You may never be accused, but you've seen it done. You've watched women tied and dragged to the town square. You've watched the so-called interrogations that are really just rituals of pain. Iron pins, hot pokers, thumb screws, water dunkings. The logic is circular. If you confess, you're a witch. If you deny it, you're lying, and still a witch. Truth isn't the goal. The spectacle is. And worst of all, they get confessions because anyone will confess to anything when they haven't slept in 4 days and their joints have been pulled from their sockets. You remember one woman in particular. Let's call her Margaretha, a widow, 60, lame in one foot, took in orphans, fed the poor. She was accused because someone saw her walking in the fog and then their cow gave sour milk. That was enough. They brought her in, kept her in a cell, with no light, starved her, whispered prayers through the walls to cleanse her soul. And after a week, she confessed to flying through the night on a stick and kissing the devil's backside. You helped wash her body after they hanged her, and you noticed the marks, burned scars, bruising, torn fingernails. That wasn't confession, that was torture. You said nothing. But you remembered. Even the trials aren't what they seem. They aren't really about witches. They're about control, about making people fear one another more than they fear the rulers. You start to see it everywhere. The silencing, the tightening, the constant pressure to conform or be crushed. And maybe, just maybe, that's when the question begins to change. Not how do I survive being accused of witchcraft, but how do I survive a world that needs witches to explain why it's broken? So, let's talk about animals, specifically yours. Do you have a cat, a dog, maybe a toad that lives under your porch, a bird that visits your window when you leave out crumbs? Congratulations. You're harboring demons. At least that's what the court records say. They call them familiars, spirits that witches feed with their blood and send out to do mischief. Familiars are sneaky, familiar-shaped, familiar-sounding, but absolutely not just your pets. And in the 17th century, if your dog limps, your cat hisses, or your goose wanders somewhere it shouldn't, it might just become evidence. Actual legal evidence. There are records, sworn testimony, describing how a woman was convicted because her chicken looked at a neighbor's baby, and it died the next week. One old man said his neighbor's black cat watched him with the devil's eye, which somehow explained why his knees hurt in winter. One servant girl was accused after someone found a hedgehog in her pantry, because obviously hedgehogs don't just exist. They must be sent. Let's be honest, Doctor. This is the part where it stops being scary and starts being absurd. But absurdity is not your friend, it's your executioner. You see, the thing about these trials is that they don't rely on logic. They can't. Because if you apply logic, the whole thing falls apart. So instead, they run on fear. Fear of the forest, fear of the night, fear of the woman who talks to herself, fear of your daughter's fever, fear of your crops failing, fear of your own guilt when you beat your son and he doesn't wake up. Fear needs an outlet. And in 17th century Europe, it had one ready-made, the witch, and the witch never works alone. So, of course, she has animals, and they all have names. In England, trial records mention cats named Pyewacket, Vinegar Tom, and Grey Malkin. In Germany, there are tales of toads with red eyes and rats with gold rings in their ears. In Scotland, there's the woman who allegedly kept a weasel that whispered prophecies. Let's pause and appreciate how much LSD you'd have to be on to believe that in court. But again, belief was not the issue. Belief was required because witchcraft, at its core, was a crime of the imagination. It wasn't about what you did. It was about what others thought you could do. Your neighbor said you looked at her baby funny? Witch? Someone's cow died, and they remember you muttering to yourself 3 days ago? Witch. The village priest had a nightmare and heard your voice in it? Oh, full-on coven, probably. And if someone claimed your cat was seen on their roof the night their barn caught fire, well, now you're not just a witch, you're a pyromancer. Never mind the candle fell. Never mind the barn was half rotten. Never. Mind there's no proof your cat even knows what a roof is. Proof isn't required when the crime itself is invisible. And so you learn to live small. You stop naming your animals. You let them go, one by one. You learn not to look too long at anything that might be considered unnatural. Owls, foxes, ferrets, bees. Better to be safe than staked. You stop feeding the birds. You stop feeding yourself when people are watching. Because even sharing food can look suspicious. A pinch of salt at the wrong moment becomes a curse. A piece of bread offered too kindly is now a hex. You speak plainly. You never boast. You avoid riddles, jokes, proverbs. You keep your hands out of your pockets, your sleeves rolled back. You never ever whistle, because whistling apparently calls demons, and you don't want that. You just want to survive. Now there's another layer, a quieter one the judges don't write about, but the villagers whisper over fences that the familiars protect you, that they know when the bailiff's coming, that they lead you away from danger, that the owl's call in the middle of the night isn't just a bird hunting mice. It's a warning that if you burn the right herbs and speak the right words, the spirit inside the dog or the crow or the hare will guide you to safety. You don't believe that, of course not. But you still sleep better when your cat curls on your chest. You still whisper thank yous to the tree that shelters your house. You still leave crumbs on the sill for the robin. Because in a world this unpredictable, kindness is insurance. Gratitude is armor. And even if the spirits aren't real, someone's listening. You're not sure when you started hiding things under the floorboards, the dried flowers, the silver pins, the feather and bone charms. You know they mean nothing. You know it's not magic. But something about it calms your heart, anchors your soul. A ritual you can control in a world where everything else is shifting sand. It's not witchcraft, it's survival. And maybe, when the worst comes, those little things, your cat, your herbs, your whispered prayers, won't save you, but they'll remind you that you were someone, that you tried, that in a time of fear and madness and ignorance, you chose to live with dignity, even if the world calls that treason. So, you've survived your pets, you've survived the gossip. Now let's talk about the one thing you really can't hide, your body. Specifically, your female body. That rebellious sack of blood and bone that refuses to behave, that bleeds when it shouldn't, that gets pregnant when you don't want it to, that ages and sags and leaks and stretches and screams, and every single part of it is suspect. You see, in 17th century Europe, your body isn't really yours, it's God's and your husband's and your father's, and if we're being honest, your local priest's, everyone but yours. Let's start from the top, birth. You don't get to be born in peace. The moment you emerge, screaming, slippery, probably under a thatched roof in a freezing room, you've already got problems. If you're a girl, there's disappointment, subtle or not. Because boys inherit land, boys carry names, girls carry shame and dowries and too many questions. If your mother dies in childbirth, which is a solid 1 in 5 chance, that's your fault too. Some midwives will say it was a sign, a punishment, a mark. And if you live, well, congratulations. You get baptized so fast your head is still steaming, because unbaptized babies don't get a name, a burial, or a chance at heaven. Just a quiet hole behind the churchyard and a whispered prayer that God looks the other way. No pressure, right? Now fast forward a few years. You're 8 or 9. You've learned to curtsy, to say yes, Father, to clean chamber pots, and, very importantly, to not make noise when men are around. Because women are seen, not heard, and girls are neither. If you're clever, you start learning what to avoid. Don't laugh too loud. Don't look too smart. Don't look too simple either, or they'll call you touched. Don't stare at people's eyes. Don't run unless it's urgent. Don't sit with your knees apart. Don't be alone too often. But don't be too social either. Oh, and don't bleed in public, because menstruation, that's the big one. You're now a walking vessel of sin. Back then, periods weren't just uncomfortable. They were evidence, signs of weakness, proof that women were ruled by the moon, by fluids, by mysterious humors bubbling up from within. The church had whole books written by bishops and monks explaining how a menstruating woman could spoil crops, sour milk, or cause a man's sword to rust just by walking past. You think I'm exaggerating? One physician wrote that menstrual blood could drive dogs mad and kill beehives. Another claimed it was so powerful it could wilt flowers. And if your neighbor's wine spoiled the same week you got your first period, better start hiding the matches. Childbirth, though, that's the grand finale. It's sacred, it's holy, it's horrifying, and it's a death sentence in disguise. You give birth at home, probably with a midwife and a few women from the village. No doctors, no anesthesia, no sterilization, just linen cloths, boiled water, herbs for luck, and hope. Hope that the baby's not breech. Hope your pelvis holds. Hope your womb doesn't rupture. Hope no one smells sulfur. Hope no one sees anything they think is a bad omen, because if something goes wrong, and it often does, you'll be the one blamed. Stillbirth must have made a pact with the devil. Baby born with a twisted limb? That's not a child, that's a changeling. Too many babies? You're unnatural. Too few? Also unnatural. And if the baby dies and someone remembers you muttering over tea last week, get ready to be asked, under oath, whether you fed it to your familiar. It didn't help that midwives, the ones who knew anything about female anatomy, were both trusted and feared, celebrated when things went right, tortured when things went wrong. Half the women tried for witchcraft in this century. Midwives, herbalists, wise women, the ones who knew too much, and this, really, is the core problem. Knowing how to ease pain with herbs. Suspicious, Knowing the right time of the month to avoid pregnancy? Devil's knowledge. Knowing how to read. Dangerous. Knowing how to write. Treasonous. Because a woman who knows things is a woman who thinks, and a woman who thinks might start asking questions. About the priest. About her husband. About why she's not allowed to sing outside or speak Latin or own land or go to the tavern, and that's the slipperiest slope of all. So, what do? You pretend, you smile, you nod, you mutter prayers in Latin you don't understand because they keep you safe. You carry dried lavender and pretend it's just for the smell. You help your neighbor give birth in secret and say it was God's grace. You stop asking questions and then, if you're lucky, really lucky, you get old, you go gray, you stoop, you slow down. But even that, doctor, comes at a price. Because old women? They're the most dangerous of all. No children, no husband, still alive, must be the devil's doing. You thought you had it all figured out, didn't you? You were living small, minding your own business, avoiding the obvious pitfalls. You learned how to survive in a world that despises you simply for existing in the skin you were born into. You stopped making eye contact with men who linger too long. You avoided the local priest, and you gave your cat extra cuddles to ward off suspicion. But here's the thing. No one tells you, doctor, there is no escaping the church, and when they start sniffing around for witches, there is no hiding. Let's talk about church courts. Now, you may think the courts are just for thieves and murderers, right? You're just a quiet woman minding her own business, maybe mixing a little herbal tea now and then. Not quite a criminal. But in the eyes of the church, every woman's potential is criminal. Every whisper, every movement, every glance, potential evidence. Evidence of what? Witchcraft, obviously. The first thing you need to know is this. The church doesn't need much to arrest you. No need for solid evidence. No need for proof. They have something far more powerful. Accusation. Accusation is enough. Just the whiff of something odd, and it's a trial. And the second you're accused, your life is no longer your own. So let's say someone in your village, a neighbor maybe, or a spiteful acquaintance, has decided you've cursed their crops. Or worse, you're responsible for a death. Maybe it's the farmer down the road whose cow died mysteriously, or the child that took ill for no reason. Or maybe it's just the fact that you've got a bit too much knowledge about herbs. The fact that you can read means trouble. That's a red flag all on its own. Your accuser marches straight to the local priest, or worse, the local magistrate. And once you're accused, the rest is practically a formality. Now, don't get comfortable thinking you can argue your way out of it. Oh no, you don't get to speak freely in a church court. The trial isn't about truth. It's not about who you really are. It's about what they need you to be. The first thing you'll encounter is the interrogation. They don't even call it an interrogation. No, that would imply you're allowed to speak your own mind. No, it's a holy questioning, one that's meant to rattle your mind and make you second-guess everything you know. Here's the thing, though. You're not going to get the chance to tell your side of the story. You're not going to get to sit calmly, look them in the eye, and calmly explain how you've only ever done good for your village. No. Instead, you'll be asked leading questions designed to make you incriminate yourself. Have you ever experienced visions? Do you think yourself more powerful than a man? Have you ever been seen with your familiar? And if you hesitate for even a moment, you've just handed them what they need. Any sign of uncertainty, any whisper of doubt, and the inquisitor will twist it, turn it, pull it into something dark and unnatural. And if you answer no, it'll be taken as a lie. It's a no-win situation. And let's talk about evidence, shall we? The church doesn't need solid proof. They just need things that look like proof. So if someone comes to them with a suspicion, they'll find a way to turn the simplest things into your downfall. For example, let's say you once had a strange dream. Not the kind of dream where you wake up sweating and gasping, but the sort where everything's a bit off. You're standing in a circle of trees, and there's a man with a mask, or a serpent weans its way around your legs. You wake up? Sure. It was just a dream, but you can't shake the feeling that maybe there's something otherworldly about it. You mention this dream to a friend, just casually, just to talk, that's all. Fast forward a few weeks, and now the dream is evidence. The inquisitor will tell you that the dream was a sign. Perhaps it was a vision of hell or a warning from the devil himself. Maybe the dream showed you your own coven, and by speaking of it, you've damned yourself. That dream you thought was just weird, now it's your death sentence. Next, let's talk about confessions. Now don't get me wrong, you can lie your way through the trial. But the thing is, the more you deny, the more suspicious you look. And denying things, no matter how ludicrous, just makes them want to accuse you more. That's when they hit you with the torture. No, you're not being stretched on the rack in the back of a dungeon. This isn't some Hollywood movie. It's more subtle than that. You'll be left in a cold cell, a dark one, no food, no drink, no one to talk to except the shadows. And soon enough, you'll start to question yourself. You might think you hear voices or see shapes or feel things creeping along your skin. Maybe you're hallucinating. Maybe you're just tired. But in your mind, you can't be sure. And there it is, this slow, gnawing feeling that perhaps you are guilty. Maybe you're not so innocent. Maybe all that knowledge you had, that bit of strange wisdom you kept to yourself, was dark after all. And then when you're in your most fragile state, the inquisitor comes to you and says, "You know, it would be easier if you simply admitted what you've done. We know you've made a pact. You can confess, and we'll save you. But if you continue to deny it, there's no way out. And you don't have much of a choice, because if you confess, you get a trial, yes, but it's a trial with some possibility of redemption. It's a trial where you might walk out alive. But if you don't confess, if you keep denying it, then the trial will have one outcome, the stake. So, you confess. You give in. You tell them whatever they want to hear, even if you've never done a thing, even if you didn't mean to hurt anyone. Even if you were just an ordinary woman in a world that wanted to eat you alive, but now your confession is proof of your guilt. Now your name is on the list. Your name is on the lips of the priests, the judges, the villagers. They have all they need. And what's your punishment? Oh, it's not always a quick death. It might be the flogging first, maybe some time in a cage. You might be paraded through town for everyone to see so they can point and shout and maybe throw stones at you. It's a humbling experience. It's a sign that you were found guilty, and the people need to know so they don't end up like you. If they're feeling generous, and that's a big if, you might get a small execution, the beheading, the one where you kneel, and it's done quick. But if the court's feeling really vengeful, well, the stake is waiting for you. The burning, that's the final choice, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. So, let's imagine, for a moment, that you've survived, that you've somehow managed to make it through your trial and escaped with your life intact. You weren't burned at the stake, or you didn't lose your head. You've just been sentenced to a few years in prison, or maybe you've been exiled from your village, or perhaps forced to wear the badge of shame in the form of a scarlet letter, or whatever equivalent they decide is enough to make you. A walking example of what happens when a woman steps out of line. Now, here's where things get tricky. Surviving doesn't mean living. The church has already branded you a witch, and that mark sticks to you, even if you've confessed and repented. You don't get to just walk away, scrub your hands, and live a quiet life again. There are consequences. Oh, and they're not the kind of consequences that fade away in a few weeks or months. This is a permanent scarlet letter, but instead of a letter, it's more like a brand, a mark of shame that you'll carry for the rest of your life. The fall of reputation. Remember when we talked about accusation being the worst thing that could happen to you? Well, this is the fallout. Even if the trial is over, the accusation never truly leaves you. Even if you're found innocent, or if the trial was a complete farce, you can't just go back to being the person you once were. You're tainted now. Let's say you live through it. You return to your village, assuming they let you. The stares? Oh, they're not subtle. The whispering, it's constant. You can practically hear it every time you walk through town, every time you're near anyone. She's the one, the witch. They don't care if you were proven innocent or if you never actually practiced witchcraft in the first place. To the rest of the world, you are a witch. You are the woman who stood before the church and confessed. You are a walking symbol of what happens when women get ideas above their station, and now you're marked. Not just by the church, but by the people. Property seized, wealth lost. But you're not just walking around with the whispers behind your back. Oh no, the repercussions are worse. See, in those days, any wealth or property a witch had was considered to be tainted by the devil's influence. And here's where things get even more insidious. Your property is fair game. If you owned land or if you had any means of financial stability, guess what? The church doesn't believe that property should remain in your hands. It's been tainted. Anything connected to witchcraft is now their possession. And just like that, your house, your belongings, your savings, they're gone. They're taken from you without a second thought. But wait, you might be thinking, I didn't even do anything. Well, that doesn't matter. The moment you were accused, the world decided that you weren't allowed to have wealth anymore. It wasn't just the church that took what was yours, it was your community. And that meant that your life became a series of strange ironies. The complicity of the people. Remember how we talked about the power of accusation? That was just the beginning. Now comes the social fallout. Sure, your neighbor might have been the one who ratted you out to the priest or the magistrate, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is that everyone around you, every single person in your life, has become complicit in your downfall. That's the funny thing about these trials. They're not just a punishment for you, they're a collective punishment for the entire village. You've been condemned, yes, but so has everyone who looked the other way. So they'll turn on you now. They'll avoid you. They won't speak to you in the streets. If they ever supported you in any way, you'll be lucky if they don't. Come for them next, those whispers. They turn into stories, stories that paint you as the devil-worshipping seductress who led men astray, the one who had the power to control the weather, the one who poisoned children with a wink. And you, even in your quietest moments, will feel the ripple of those stories through the town. Your reputation will be destroyed. Even if the trial ended in your favor, you will never be you again. The struggle for survival now, this is the part where you might think you can rebuild. Maybe you get a job doing laundry or helping in the fields. Maybe you're forced to work for others, scraping together whatever you can, just to survive. If you're lucky, maybe you can find someone who isn't afraid of you, but those people are few and far between. For most, the real struggle is just staying alive. Finding enough food, finding shelter, getting enough sleep. You've been ostracized from your community, so you have no one to rely on. You have no real protection. In fact, you probably sleep with one eye open now. Because while the trial may be over, the real dangers never truly end. The local authorities could come back at any time just to check in on you, just to see if you're still a threat. After all, you were once accused of witchcraft, and in their eyes, that's never something you can just wash away. The end of the road. Now, what happens if you really are unlucky? If you don't manage to rebuild, if the villagers turn on you so completely that you have nothing left? Well, in that case, you might not survive long at all. And here's the truth. The end of the road isn't always a quick one. Oh, sure, you might get burned at the stake or beheaded, but that's not the only way it ends. You could fade away quietly, your name forgotten by time, your legacy erased. But you'd still be a casualty, a victim of a world that had no mercy. For you from the start, but for now, you keep going. You take it day by day. You find the small ways to fight back, whether it's a hidden smile with the farmer's daughter or a secret nod from the old herbalist who knows exactly what you've been through. You keep living. Because as much as they might want to erase you, as much as they might want to bury your name in the ashes, you won't let them, not yet. The end of the story? Well, is it the end? Maybe, maybe not. This is the world you live in now, Doctor. A world where survival is a matter of staying quiet, staying small, and constantly watching. you're back. Where the moment you make a mistake, the moment you try to live outside the box, outside the lines of what's considered acceptable, you'll be hunted. But the worst part? There's no guarantee that things will get better. What you've just learned is this: being born a woman in the 17th century is a dangerous gamble, and being accused of witchcraft? That's the lottery you'd rather never win. Now, in case you still think there's some way out of all this madness, let's take one last look. What happens after you're gone? How will they remember you, and why does it matter? You survived, or you didn't. Honestly, at this point it hardly matters, because once you've been branded a witch, in body or in memory, your story doesn't end when your lungs stop drawing breath. That's the final cruelty. See, long after you've been buried or turned to ash, depending on how enthusiastically your neighbors celebrated your purification, you live on. Not as yourself, of course, but as a warning, a whisper, a cautionary tale told to other women. Don't step out of line like she did. They won't remember the herbs you knew, the kindness you showed, or the quiet way you nursed sick children when no one else would. They'll remember the trial, the gossip, the flames. You become the local legend mothers use to keep their daughters quiet. You're the reason someone refuses to speak out when the priest fondles his altar boys, or when a husband drinks too much and breaks his wife's jaw. They saw what happened to you. Why risk becoming the next witch? And yet, strangely, you also become something else. Over time, through the soot and shadows, you take on a second life, not in shame but in defiance, because history is a trickster. It forgets things, twists things, buries the truth in the shallowest of graves. But every now and then, someone comes along with a shovel and starts digging, and what they find? It's you, who were punished for being clever, for healing when no one else could, for refusing to apologize for existing with too much spirit, too much independence, too much you. Eventually, people start to remember the truth. That witchcraft wasn't just a crime, it was a label. A convenient excuse to silence women who didn't fit. Outsiders, healers, widows, wise women, and sometimes just unlucky ones. The world moves on. Sort-off flash forward a few centuries. It's the 19th century now, and people laugh about the silly superstitions of their ancestors. They pretend they're more rational, more enlightened. But if you look closely, not much has changed. Women are still being called witches, just with different words: hysterical, emotional, unstable, manipulative, slut, bitch, too loud, too quiet, too proud, too ugly, too beautiful, too ambitious, too old, too much. Sound familiar? It should. The burning stopped, but the suspicion didn't. It just changed clothes. The nooses were replaced by gossip. The stakes became reputations. And if they couldn't take your life, they'd just take your credibility. And now? Now you've got women reclaiming the word, calling themselves witches again, not because they talk to demons, but because they're done apologizing for their power. They're done being told what's acceptable, what's feminine, what's safe. It's a strange twist, isn't it? You, once hunted for your supposed dark arts, have become a symbol of rebellion, of healing, of mystery and strength. One last thing, before the fire dies. So, what do we do with this story? We remember it, we tell it, not to scare, but to warn. Because the danger never truly disappears. The moment society gets too comfortable, too sure of its virtue, that old fire starts to crackle again. It never dies, only sleeps. And sometimes, all it takes to wake it up is a rumor, a lie, a little power held by the wrong kind of woman. You lived through it, or you tried to. And now, centuries later, we whisper your name, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to reverence. Not because you were perfect, not because you were magical, but because you were real, and you refused to vanish quietly. So if someone ever asks what it was like to be a woman in the 17th century, what it meant to survive when the world was set on burning you for breathing too loudly, just tell them this: she was called a witch, and they tried to erase her, but she never really left.